Okay, we had a computer failure, so we got behind schedule. So the next panel is this next panel is really about some of the more innovative companies that are out there operating today, using data as a foundational layer to solve more problems in the marketplace and develop new revenues. We got a little bit behind, so I'm cutting all of your conversations short and getting your attention back up here on stage. And I'll turn it over to you to help us learn more about these companies.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to the Music Metadata and Emergent Technologies panel. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about metadata and its importance. I'm sure you've heard a lot already throughout the conference about that. Some of the challenges that we have in the industry, and how our panelist companies are using emergent technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and blockchain to address some of these challenges. So I'm Kelly Jones. I am the Director of Data and Analytics at CD Baby. I've been with the company about 2 years, a little over. And CD Baby is a company whose mission is to simply help artists make more money from their music. And the way we do this is with physical and digital distribution. We aggregate and pay out weekly for different kinds of royalties. We do sync licensing, promotion, help artists with video platform monetization as well. So we're doing lots of stuff. And all of this takes metadata. So what is metadata? Right? We hear the word all the time, we hear it in the news, but really what is it? So the dictionary definition is data about data, which to me is a little unsatisfying. So the way I think about it is the things like that belong to the composition or the track, like the title, the artist. Was the performing artist a band, or were they a single artist? The genre, the performer, all of these things that help the music surface wherever it's at and helps the people who made the music or are involved in it get paid. So what are the challenges from CD Baby's point of view? We have a lot of legacy titles. I talked about this a little bit in the previous panel. And titles from 20, 15, even 10 years ago, the metadata needs were very different than what we have today. So that's a little bit of a challenge for us when we are trying to match and get artists paid for performance royalties and such. We work with over 150 partners, and there's no real standardization. It's the Wild West out there. Many of those partners give us their requirements for how they want the metadata delivered, and then when they send it back to us in usage and royalty reporting, they have their own formats for how they do that. And when we get those usage and royalty reports back, there's often missing or changed metadata, which makes it very hard for us to match to figure out who to pay. And many times we do that with technology, but the leftover bits, and most reports have leftover bits, we have to have someone manually go through and match to decide who should get paid. So I am very excited to be here today to talk with our panelists about what they are doing in this space and how they are addressing these challenges. So could each of you please take 2 or 3 minutes, introduce yourselves and your companies and what space in the industry you're working in? Start with Rory.
Hi, Rory Bernard. I'm CEO for Think Tank. We run a white label platform for publishers, labels, and various broadcasters. It's all about digital asset management and royalty accounting, So deep metadata usage, understanding what's in the catalog, the rights, the what abilities they've got to commercialize, and then tracking payments and managing money afterwards. Metadata is sort of fundamental to all of that, and it's always the biggest challenge for all of our clients is that's great to have a great catalog, but it's actually worth less and less unless your metadata is up to scratch and you're really looking after it. CD Baby, of course, is one of our clients, and we run a lot of licensing platforms with them. And with that sort of size of catalog, it brings other challenges just above data hygiene. It's just sheer volume. And some of our larger royalty accounting platforms are running 3, 4, 5 billion rows of data a year through them. And at this state of the industry, you've got to be able to process that sort of information on an ongoing basis. And its ability to be able to manage that sort of level of metadata, that's really going to be key over the course of the next 2 to 3 years. And I can remember doing a panel 3 or 4 years ago where this sort of conference would have been having 2 people sitting in the room because metadata is really boring and technical. But everyone's now woken up to it's critical to get your metadata right or your catalog's just not going to be earning any money.
Jean-Luc?
Yeah. Hi. My name is Jean-Luc Biolets. I'm a CEO from Music Story, a company from France. We have been cleansing, qualifying, enriching metadata for 10 years now. We are dedicated into music only. We are working mainly for DSPs on many parts of the work, coverage, sourcing, licensing of different parts of metadata. Just to give you some examples, artist images, or being part of an ecosystem with some partners like Lyric Find to do a correct matching and to have a correct coverage of all the catalogs. We are working also for the medias and mainly also a bit of music industry. But our purpose, us in Music Story, is to help our clients to get more, interaction with the music, more engagement. So we are working not on the part of the, the rights, PROs, and all that part, but more on all the components to gain more. It's voice control or this kind of interface, visual interface to gain more usage on the music. And we have been. We have been through some tricky resolution of some problems, just like artist disambiguation. This morning I was hearing the problem of all the releases and the one unique album gathering all the releases to get the famous original release dates. That's what we try humbly to do, and what we do for many clients today.
Lindsay?
Hey, I'm Lindsay, and I work for Exactuals. Exactuals is a payments company actually owned by City National Bank. And we make payments to non-employees, started out in the film and television industry, making residual payments. And then the company moved into music about 3 years ago, where, again, you're making a similar kind of payments. But what Exactuals noticed in moving into the music space, of course, is something that we all deal with, the challenge of properly attributing folks because of the metadata challenges that exist. So the company has made a large investment into a second product we have called Ray, which is a really intelligent data integration technology. We have about 4 different use cases we use with clients today. First and foremost is just general catalog enhancement, or being able to take multiple representations of data your company might have and infer consensus around them. Another space that we're in quite often is in the catalog acquisition space. So again, anywhere there's a transaction of metadata occurring, there's an opportunity to take advantage of that time and improve your metadata or get it ready for whichever direction it's headed or whatever standard it's headed to. And then a bulk of our work is actually with distributors, automating some of the quality control that exists. Instead of reviewing every single piece of content and all of its metadata before going out into the marketplace, we found a lot of ways to apply our technology to speed up that process. And then lastly, a lot of our data is available via an API, so a lot of third parties will directly interact or integrate with our product to get that good data, when they need it on demand.
Hi, I'm Greg Delaney from Entertainment Intelligence. So we're probably more on the actual data consumption side of things, but we still need metadata very much to do our job. So we collect the streaming data from the major services, Spotify, Apple, Deezer, etc. We're now doing YouTube, and we're also working with Pandora to start including their data. We do about 120 million streams a day, got 4 million tracks on the catalog and growing all the time, predominantly for the indie market. With metadata, we pull that from people like CI, Fuga, Audio Salad, etc. And for us, we have to get it from those sources because it's the only really reliable way we can get that metadata and then match streaming data to the catalog. Once we've got that, then we start looking at, well, what can you actually do with it? How do you set benchmarks that tell people in the industry, how am I performing? How am I measuring up against other equivalent artists, labels, products, tracks, etc.? And that's why getting metadata right is really important. And we also see now that genre, for instance, is sort of dying out. It's mood now. But if you're using mood for a playlist, does that catalog the band as a mood? So those questions are coming up. We're now starting to develop more unique IP around how do we push this metadata combined with the streaming data to understand more about the products and tracks that you're all producing.
Thanks. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, I gave a rough definition of metadata. Was there anything that I missed? And the challenges that I brought up, would you have more challenges to add to that list? Open to the panel.
Well, I think one of the problems we all see is things like DSPs not applying it in a standard way. We all know dear old Apple don't apply UPCs properly. So when we get the streaming data back, it's a hybrid, it's a mixture, it's non-existent. It's just, that can't exist now. It's rubbish and it has to stop.
Sometimes on the metadata side, we are talking about descriptors very often. And the standard was from the DDEX, but for the DSPs, all other metadata around are sometimes assimilated as metadata artist images, but also external links, external IDs. Okay, the ID is very important. ISRC is good. Okay, but knowing what Music Brain's ID is compared to the Spotify ID and not doing any mistakes on that, it's a very difficult part, and it's a part of the metadata job for me. Recently, I've stated that DDEX is working more on media enrichment on the ERN side of the messages, and it's very interesting how those people try to define new fields and new definition of what it is media enrichment. So it's a part of the game, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll just jump in and add too. I mean, I think with Exactuals investing in the metadata space, we're really banking on the idea that there may not be consensus around standards for a time to come. And to address that, we have been focused on, knowing that standards are hard to enforce, are often changing. Different parties are acquiring different data every day. How can we build a technology that bridges that gap? It makes it easier to do that transformation and integration. Because I think we all are on the same page about how difficult it can be to expect others to enforce standards.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, standardization is something that's important in the industry and is getting more and more high profile. I mean, I know the DDEX meetings are in the next couple of weeks, and it's going to be trying to get some of these standards over the line. I mean, just from our point of view, and a lot of people don't realize this, that ISRCs are not a very reliable way of identifying tracks, because we find that DSPs just change them randomly into various other things. So what you think is reliable metadata actually turns out to be something that turns systems inside out, because you get all sorts of weird and wonderful artifacts coming out of it. And it's awareness of these issues that people realize they now need to start investing money in as part of the industry, and specifically in their catalogs. If it's not right, your catalog's not going to be worth that much money, and it's going to drop straight to your bottom line and or to your shareholders' bottom line at the end of the day.
So it seems like we all are hoping for standards, but we're not terribly...
But if it is such a struggle to set a standard, and we know often it's death by committee, then is it possible to look at a protocol that allows all of us and the industry to share information and actually get consensus. So if you say, I don't know what this track actually is classified as, if someone else can say, well, I've got it, and that can be corroborated by the creator or someone along the chain to go, yep, that's accurate. It's taking the theory of blockchain, but actually just human, using the combined data sets. You don't need a blockchain to do that. You just need people who've got reliable sets of data to say that's validated. It's been approved by 2 other sources. It's now accurate.
Right.
But that only works if you all work
If
together.
we all work together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
I think it raises the question too of like who owns the data, and if you make changes to it, is it a derivative? And I think the idea of sharing metadata is one that people are warming up to more because I think it raises all ships.
Yeah, we face that challenge as well because our artists are independent artists and they hand type in their own metadata, many of them not really understanding what they're doing and not really understanding that that's what helps get their music surfaced and played. And so we struggle with this idea. We can see that their metadata is technically not right, but do we have the right to go change it?
That's where you get the independent artists putting in 200 keywords on their track, and of course it doesn't get found on anything, then it just gets kicked off everything, so...
Exactly, yeah. So what specific challenges are each of your companies addressing? Lindsay talked a little bit about Exactuals and Ray. Each of you, and what kinds of emergent technology are you using? And I'm wondering if we need to also define what AI is, what ML is, and blockchain for the audience.
I mean, we're beginning to use more and more machine learning in order to be able to drive some of our data inputs, because we may be getting rights in from a number of different organizations, and we've got to make choices as to who's the authority out of that, and need some sort of level of automation in order to be able to say 3 of these agree and 1 of them's out, so therefore we'll pick the 3 that agree, or variations of that sort of thing. I mean, the one thing that we don't use is blockchain, because it's just something that's aimed at investors to drop a lot of money on a company, and operationally it just kills your systems, and it's just a really bad technical choice. Okay. But we need more and more ways of being able to choose correct data types and the ability to be able to assess those quickly, dynamically on the fly.
So basically, I believe strongly in the combination of the human and the machine, So that's, for me, the key solution. That's what we can do today to produce the best metadata we can. So for doing that, you need, of course, you need ingestion, matching, semantic matching a lot, and using also audio recognition. The combination of the semantic and the audio can be a good way to solve a lot of problems. Multi-ISRC on one audio file, for example, or artist disambiguation. Okay, but it's mainly using this to curate, to do curation on the metadata is okay. And you need catalog management, you need editorial people, musicologists to complete the data. So you can produce metadata through audio, machine learning. You have some techniques for that, but to have the human to complete, to be able to produce the right. It's always questionable, but to produce the good metadata is a good way to work. Using, I would say, recently I've seen a lot of overall global solution. You trying to use AI to produce, to solve all the problems. Do the curation, using the audio, produce the metadata, and be able to do also recommendation. I don't believe in one unique solution, I don't believe in that. But now what I can see is on the cycle of the production, on very tiny part of that, AI can be useful. I will give you just one example. To pick images. Now AI AI technology is quite good to recognize images. So to help people to pick the right artist images in a database where if you take Getty Image, for example, you have millions of images and it's not easy to find the right picture for the right artist. You can just use it to make more productivity to produce the images. And I believe that it's in those tiny parts of the process that you can help people to produce the metadata, not replace all this by the big system, because it's kind of a song of the siren, you see, for me.
Yeah, in my discussions with Lindsay's team and in the work that I do with actually matching our royalty reports, it does seem to come down to we can use machines to do a lot of the work, but we're always going to have to be touching it. Someone's going to have to touch it. So, yeah. Lindsay?
Yeah. I think there are maybe two key technologies that we use that make us good at what we do, and one of them is, of course, using machine learning within a lot of our algorithms to infer consensus around which record is correct. But there's this, kind of an overarching concern with machine learning around false positives, something that may look like a match but not actually be a match.
Yes.
And since we are a payments company and our the data is supposed to be used for folks to be able to make accurate payments, that's a really big concern for us. And so a big bulk of our focus has actually been on being able to assign confidence to the data that we're making available, both at the input as well as the output. And one way we're able to do that is with the other technology I think is important that we use, which is, it's not a crazy technology, graph databases as opposed to relational databases. Relational databases are basically any database you've ever seen or an Excel spreadsheet where everything has a one-to-one relationship. Whereas graph databases are more similar to what you might be familiar with in Facebook. And what's great about graph is it looks at the relationships between different fields of information. And when you think about the music business, it's full of many-to-many relationships, very few one-to-one relationships. You have one musical work with many sound recordings, with many artists, many publishers, et cetera. So by being able to structure the data in kind of a graph way, you're able to learn a lot about the relationships between the data, not just how similar one string of information is to another. So that's, I think, probably some of the cooler technology that we implement to make smart decisions.
Yeah, that is really cool. I didn't realize you were using graph.
Yeah.
Ah, nice. Sweet. So
Yeah,
Greg?
I would agree. Graph is a great way to go. And again, when it comes to audience data, it's not metadata, but even things like playlist data is technically a metadata in itself, and we build up playlist libraries. But understanding, superfans, for instance, that type of thing, lean forward, lean back, that type of thing, you need to be able to look at lots and lots of different relationships. Did this person play this song from a collection, having previously heard it on a playlist? And did they save it? Did they skip it? Did they do those sorts of things? And once you understand that and the relationships, then tie it back to the catalog, and then you can understand whether your audience is moving towards a different type of music or they're growing in a different territory. So that tends to be where we use machine learning. I think AI is probably really should be a term reserved for your robotic, people building robots, because effectively we're not looking for an artificial intelligence. We just want the machines to be able to do a lot of that crunching that we can't do. I think we're on 45 billion rows of data that we crunch to get our benchmarks at the moment and growing every day. You can't do that if you're just relying on, like say, relational databases, they just die. So yeah, we're similar.
Yeah, I heard in a previous panel yesterday that AI, I liked what this person said, I can't remember his name, that artificial intelligence is not a thing, it's more an idea. It's a use of different technologies to get a result. So
we're not there yet.
We're not there yet.
Machines aren't self-aware, so...
No.
And remember, to learn, you have something to learn. So you have to produce something to learn for a machine to learn. It's very important.
That's true. Yeah. And blockchain, we've been hearing about it for a long time, but it doesn't seem like it's really as Rory said, it's not really much of a thing yet?
It's the number
or-
one thing to get money off investors, and it's also the best way to heat your house you could possibly use. I mean, from a technical perspective, it's just not something that most high-performance computing companies use. It's irrelevant to generally running things. There usually is a much better way that's proven, that's faster, that's easier to do that sort of stuff.
Okay. And it's usually touted as like the financial, it's having a financial record within the data that's unbreakable. And Lindsay, that's what Exactuals does, and you don't use blockchain at all, or?
No, we don't utilize blockchain ourselves. Do work with a couple of blockchain oriented companies that, of course, want to have good data initially going in. But no, we're not currently utilizing any blockchain technologies. I think one of the biggest challenges with blockchain, and I think there are some companies kind of addressing the concept well, is determining who has the authority to change the data. And even
It's that same,
Yeah.
it's the same theme.
It's a lot of the same issues that come up when you think about the GRD, like who owns the data, what data is public, what data is private,
Right.
who has access to it. So I think there are a lot of like the same issues that we've been dealing with for a decade now that still carry over with blockchain.
Interesting.
I
So,
think just to add to that,
Yeah, please.
I think it's super important to bear in mind what you're trying to achieve out of it, whether you're using blockchain or just a relational database. It's what I want to get out of this. You don't need blockchain for a lot of stuff. In fact, it gets in the way. So, I mean, it's much more about saying, this is what I want to achieve from my metadata, so therefore I don't really care what the technology is underlying it.
We'd like to explore ideas around the concept of intelligent objects as well. So rather than a blockchain, but actually saying a track could be an intelligent object. So you can ask that track, where do you live? Who wrote you, who played on you, etc. And therefore, a track can go and find itself in the world. So taking the whole sort of bot theory.
yeah.
Effectively, you can say there's a master record that says, here's all of the places that a track can be played, Tidal, YouTube, etc. And this is how you find it. Tracks can go and find themselves. So if one comes back and has found something new, it can tell the central repository, which then tells every other track, go and find yourself on this new platform. That's where you can start going. And then you can say, track, where are you most popular? What territory are you most popular in? What type of fans like you? What playlist are you appearing on? The track knows itself.
Wow.
And that's where you can start going with that type of thing.
That's fascinating. Wow. So with all of this, how can other folks in the business, how can artists utilize each of your platforms to get, what everyone wants is to get paid at the end of the day. And so could you each speak about that?
I'm not paying anyone.
I try. Getting paid, we are not in the business of getting paid, so I can speak about that. But artists came to us to say, I want good lyrics, I want good bio, I want a good artist image, I want all those stuff. So there we can do something. But yesterday I was at the Spotify presentation on the Spotify for Artists. I think now, if you take the difference between now and 5 years ago in this kind of conference, the burden of the weight to produce a good metadata is more in the lab, on the label side now, because of all those tools. And you could believe that some days metadata companies like us should have not to do something and would not exist anymore. But I don't believe in that, because you have this problem of artists setting the data and forget the data. Mm-hmm. So you need people always make mistakes between solving one problem for one artist and managing all the overall quantity of the metadata, which is huge. When you have a database of 70 million tracks and trying to involve the quality of such a database. So what I mean in that is Now, we always, if you are a DSP, you have people working on the back office. You have always people, you need always people to improve the overall quality of the database. Instead, okay, one artist giving the data will be okay, but it will not solve all the problems, you know. So that's what.
How about you, Lindsay? How can people?
If you want to try out Ray, you can go to exactuals.com and click Try Ray. And we have a demo page, which has just a little user interface on top of our API. And what you can do is just, type in some catalog you work with, or you own, or you represent, and just see what we return. It'll give you a sense of how your catalog is being represented in the marketplace and where there might be some errors or things you weren't expecting to see or information that's missing that you weren't expecting to be missing. So that's a really good kind of proof of concept to get an idea of what we can do. As far as the other use case is taking client data and working on it, that's another thing that we do oftentimes, projects for clients, and happy to discuss that with anybody.
Yeah.
So we, on our job is mainly reporting the trends, what's happening, what playlists people are on, but we're moving more now to identifying opportunities. And so, you can use benchmarks to understand how am I doing, am I performing well against the average, et cetera. And, seeing something like, we all saw the Shazam numbers for Florence and the Machine with Game of Thrones. Well, what happened after that? That's a great number. It's a good press piece. But being able to know that YouTube increased and audience increased in a certain territory, therefore you should tour there, right. Or you should be getting more merch into that area, or go and do an in-store or something like that. So that's tends to be what we do now. But we're also working on how do you engage brands, etc. So if a brand, they can't work with the majors, it's going to cost you $100,000 to get Little Mix to talk about your brand. But you can work with indies for 10,000 or something like that. So know which bands you should work with because the audience matches what you want to do, and therefore you have a better opportunity of working with them. And I think now audience aren't cynical about that stuff anymore. As long as you pick the right brands to work with, then that's it's quite acceptable. But on the metadata side, one thing I don't think we really covered was the unique artist identifier. It kills us. I mean,
yes.
ISNI or IPI, what are you going to use to do that?
Right.
And collabs and things, if Courtney Barnett and Kurt Weill play together, the two IDs should be able to be merged and linked back. Right. So we can report to Courtney's management, which we do, but Kurt Weill's management would get a different report, but then they've got the stuff they generated together. So that just agreeing that standard would make a huge, huge difference to what we do.
I agree. Yeah, we see it.
With self-releasing artists as well, often they're even got registered by the time the music's out.
They don't know what an IPI is. They don't know. Yeah. So, and Rory?
I think we drive catalog transparency and rights availability for all our clients. Like CD Baby is making sure that they can find what they need in their catalog and understand how they can commercialize it. And then our royalty accounting is all about getting paid at the end of the day and making sure the writers and publishers are getting the right sort of money to the right places. But we are super reliant on metadata, from people like Jean-Luc and Lindsay that feed into our systems to make sure that we are consolidating the right sort of information against our clients' databases. So.
Great. Well, that is all the time we have. I want to thank each of you. This has been a great conversation. And thanks, everyone, for coming and your attention.